Alright, today we are going to continue talking about fractions, decimals, and percents by filling out this foldable. So you should have this and you should have it glued in your journal by now. If you haven't done that yet, then our guest teacher can pause the video here and you can do that real fast. Now if you remember on Friday we talked about the relationship between fractions and decimals. There were quite a few of you absent. That's okay. If you weren't here, then you can get this from me when I am back on Thursday and we'll catch you up. But if you were here, you remember we filled out this number line. Let me turn it the right way. And we talked about benchmark fractions and their corresponding decimals and how those correlate. So today we are going to continue talking about that and how you can convert each of these things. So how you can convert fractions to decimals, percents to decimals, decimals to fractions, decimals to percents, percents to fractions, and fractions to percents. So that's a lot. It seems like a lot, but the rules are actually really easy. So the basic direction I like to go is fraction to decimal to percent. And as long as you know how to do those, the rest of it's pretty easy. So today we're going to start by going fraction to decimal. So you're going to open up that flap and it says divide the numerator by the denominator. Now we talked about this the other day and that's actually pretty easy to do. So let's say we have, I'm going to divide this in half because I'm going to do two different examples. So let's say I have a terminating decimal, which means it's going to end. It doesn't repeat forever. Terminating decimal. Zoom in a little bit. Okay, so let's do something easy like 1/4. Now, whenever I do that, that's the same as 1 divided by 4. Remember we talked about how our fractions look very similar to a divide sign. You're just doing the top number divided by the bottom number. So top dog goes in the house is the way I remember it. So I'm going to do 1 divided by 4. Now, can 1 go into 4? It can't, can it? So I have to add a decimal point right here past the 1 and then a 0 behind it. And then this decimal, this decimal right here, I'm going to move and put up on top of my house in the same spot. I'm going to hold that place value. So now I can do 4 goes into 10. So how many times does 4 go into 10 without going over? So that would be 2 times, right? Now 2 times 4 is 8. I subtract that and that gives me a remainder of 2. Now I need to add another 0, bring it down, and how many times does 4 go into 20? That's 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. That gives me a remainder of 0, so I'm done. My answer is 0.25. So 1/4 is the equivalent of 0.25. And we know that because 1/4 of a dollar is a quarter, 25 cents. So you're always going to divide the numerator by the denominator. Top dog goes in the house. Write that in the bottom if you want to. So top dog in the house. Write that in your notes if you need to. Okay, now I want to do an example of a repeating decimal or a non-terminating decimal. Okay, so let's do 1/9. Now remember that's 1 divided by 9. So I'm going to put 1 in the house, and I'm going to put 9 out here outside the house. 9 cannot go into 1, so I have to add a decimal point here, and then bring it up here, and then put a 0 behind it. Now I know that 9 goes into 10, right? 1 time. 1 times 9 is 9. I subtract, and that gives me 1. Now I add a 0, bring it down, and I have 10 again, don't I? 9 goes into 10 1 time. 1 times 9 is 9. Do you see the pattern now? 10 minus 9 is 1. We're going to keep doing this forever and ever and ever if we wanted to keep going. But we know by now that it's just going to keep repeating and be 1 over and over and over again. So the way that we would actually write that is 0.1, and then you draw a line over the number that repeats, and that means that it's a repeating decimal. 0.1 repeating is how you would say that. So that's how we convert our fractions to decimals. So check that off. That one's done. The next one that I want us to learn today is decimals to percents. So we're going to skip over here to this tab that says decimals to percents. This one says move the decimal 2 places to the right and add the percent sign. So that's pretty easy, right? So right here I'm going to write decimal 2% at the top because that's what we're doing. Now when I move it 2 places to the right, it's the same as multiplying by 100. If you look at the word percent, cent means 100. So percent is per 100. So if I look at a percent example, if I have 0.2, if I take 0.2 and I multiply that by 100, all I'm doing is moving my decimal 2 to the right. So that gives me 20%. So I would just get this and go like this, 1, 2, and then make that a percent sign. So let's do one more. If I have 0.37, I'm going to get my decimal, move it 2 to the right. That turns into a percent sign, and that equals 37%. I can drop that leading 0. I don't need it anymore. That was just to hold the place and kind of protect that decimal right there. So I don't need that leading 0 anymore unless there's still a decimal in front of it. Now let's say I have a longer decimal. Let's say I have 0.9464. I'm still going to get my decimal and move it 2 to the right, 1, 2. But then I'm going to have a decimal inside my percent. So it's going to be 94.64%. You're going to practice one like this in a minute. So you're going to keep some of that decimal inside the percent. You only move it 2 places to the right. Let's say I have 0.3 repeating. So when I move my decimal 2 places to the right, if that's a repeating decimal, a 3 is going to go here, not a 0. So the way I would actually write that would be 33.3% because I want to show that that's repeating. And what you might do if you see a repeating decimal, let's say you have 0.1111. If it says 0.1 repeating, I would go ahead and write out a couple of 1s. So when you move your decimal, you know to leave those numbers there. So that would be 11.1% is what I would write. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and stop there for today. And then I have another assignment that I want you to practice converting fractions to decimals and decimals to percents. And then tomorrow we will finish filling in the rest of these boxes.